Addressing energy challenges in the 21st century is becoming an increasingly complex and pressing task. In response to the multiple challenges we now face, there's been growing recognition in industry, in policy and academic circles over the past 10 to 15 years that the energy sector is deeply connected to other sectors of environmental and resource management, especially to water and agriculture. In the past, these crucial resources, energy, water and food, have been developed as separate sectors that don't really communicate with each other and have, as a result, largely been managed separately. But more and more experts are now arguing that we should move away from such compartmentalised and segmented approaches and start to govern the environment in a way that reflects the interconnections and interdependencies between these sectors. So these efforts are being mobilised around an emerging concept called the water, energy, food nexus. Water, energy and food are linked in complex ways at every single scale, from household practices right the way through to geopolitics. For instance, agriculture accounts for around 70% of total freshwater use globally. Huge amounts of energy is consumed in withdrawing, treating, transporting and using and disposing of water. And according to the United Nations, the food production and supply chain uses around 30% of the total global energy production. The production of energy is also highly water intense. So thermoelectric power plants, for example, which produce electricity from coal, oil, gas and nuclear energy, require lots of water for cooling. In the United States, for example, this accounts for nearly 40% of total freshwater withdrawals, and the picture is only going to get more complicated. New sources of energy like hydraulic fracturing or fracking and biofuels can be even more thirsty than this. For instance, depending on local soil and climate, producing 1 litre of bioethanol requires between 5 and 2,000 litres of water for irrigation. And new sources of water, like wastewater recycling, long-distance transfers by pipeline, or the desalination of seawater, are far more energy intense than traditional water supplies. So next time you turn on your tap at home, think about the amount of energy it took to collect and store that water, to transport it possibly many, many miles, to treat it so it's safe to drink, and to pump it into your house. And think of all the energy it takes to treat that water again after it goes down your plug hole. So every time you make a cup of tea or take a hot shower, every time you eat a sandwich or drink a glass of wine, you experience the outcomes of the interactions between energy, water and food. So the basic argument of Nexus thinking is that although historically we've managed these resources separately, the challenges now facing water, energy and food sustainability cannot be addressed in isolation, and that we should move therefore towards a more integrated model of environmental management. So Nexus interactions occur in 4 different forms. Firstly, as tensions. So tensions arise when competition between users squeeze supply. A good example of this is the use of cooling water for thermoelectric power plants. So secure access to water has now become a key consideration in power plant siting. In California in 2015, for example, several power plants were threatened with closure because the drought was reducing water availability. They had to buy in additional water at much higher cost, which in turn raised the price of electricity. The second type of interaction are trade-offs. Trade-offs occur when changes in one sector carry negative implications for another sector. For instance, the promotion of biofuels as a sustainable alternative to fossil fuels may present benefits for energy security or in reducing carbon emissions, but the conversion of agricultural production from food to energy may also be associated with rising food prices, accelerated land use conversion, deforestation, and increasing demand for water for irrigation. The third type of interaction are maladaptations, which are similar to trade-offs. An adaptation to a particular problem becomes a maladaptation when it inadvertently increases vulnerability to that problem. For example, purifying seawater is an increasingly popular way of securing water supply in the face of drought and climate change, but the greenhouse gas emissions associated with this very energy-intense source of water may well be increasing overall vulnerability to climate change. The fourth type of interaction are synergies. Synergies occur when an adaptation benefits more than one sector. So there's overwhelming agreement in current thinking on the water, energy, food nexus that synergies may be achieved through greater use efficiencies, i.e. that by being more efficient in the way we use energy, we are therefore becoming more efficient in our use of water and vice versa. The main managerial aim of Nexus thinking is therefore to find ways of reducing tensions, trade-offs and maladaptations between energy, water and food, and to develop synergies and shared goals between them. Nexus thinking is becoming an increasingly popular term and is now being used around the world as a sustainability concept. For example, the 2014 UN World Water Day campaign was all about the connections between water and energy. But the implications of Nexus thinking, some are now arguing, go beyond these managerial, very solutions-oriented notions. The implications of more integrated concepts of environment and society like Nexus thinking raise serious questions about politics, about fair and just management of resources, so who has access to what, and about our collective future. Given that 800 million people still suffer from malnutrition worldwide, around the same number do not have access to adequate clean water, and 2.5 billion lack adequate sanitation, and 1.3 billion people live in homes without electricity. The intersecting and interconnected challenges of energy, water and food in the 21st century could hardly be more critical.